understanding. We thank you for our teachers and our parents. We thank you for how much work they do for us. We thank you for all this we believe and pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Daniela Akello. Don't forget your hand up. Thank you. Girls, for quite a longer time, we have been talking about the British occupation of the Cape. And I think we started with the Kafir Wars, after the Dutch, then we saw how they were fought. But we made a lot of reference to the British occupation of the Cape when we were teaching you the Kafir Wars. I hope now you will be able to connect. Last week, girls, we looked at the factors for the British occupation of the Cape. Why did they occupy the Cape in 1795? And we gave you so many factors to why the British had occupied the Cape. Today, in our lesson, we are going to look at how did the British occupy the Cape. So we looked at the reasons why, and we are going to look at how. You see, in life, we normally ask ourselves these questions. Why should I attend? Why should I be attentive when the teachers are teaching the Zoom lessons? And how will I be attentive? I will be attentive if I go in my room and lock myself there, and then so that I'm free from interruptions. That is the how part of it. Then why? Simply because I want to understand whatever the teachers will teach. In the same way, when we are teaching you history, we tend to ask you such a questions: why and how? So last week we looked at why the British occupied the Cape, and how. Today we are teaching you how the British occupied the Cape. When you look at the first point we have on the screen there, we are saying when Great Britain went to war with France in 1793, both countries tried to capture the Cape so as to control. Both countries tried to capture the Cape so as to control the Cape, so as to control the important sea route to the east. They tried to capture the Cape, both countries, so that they can have control of the sea route to the east. So we are seeing the two countries trying to occupy the Cape, but then we are saying they failed. We are saying they failed. So I'm sorry, somebody was disturbing me on the other phone. Then we are saying the British occupied the Cape in 1795, ending the Dutch East Indian Company's role in the region. But before I continue with this, let me see what Daphne Namugabo is saying. Daphne.
Excuse me, sorry to ask a question, but when they ask how did the British occupy the Cape, is that a question for a course number or like the other normal ones?
Even a course number is a normal number, but it is a question of the course as you are putting it. But I don't like situations where students think that questions of the course are actually abnormal. No, it is also a normal question. That's why we teach it, Daphne, okay?
Yeah.
Is your question, Daphne?
Mr. Kagaba.
Thank you, teacher.
Mr. Kagaba.
Yes.
Mr. Kagaba.
Yes, madam.
I think you can relocate a bit. Your voice is breaking.
Sure.
If possible, you can relocate and better your network. Yes.
Is that okay? Girls, is that okay?
Yes.
Yes, teacher. Yes, teacher.
Okay. So I was saying, actually saying that the British occupied the Cape in 1795, ending the Dutch East Indian Company role in the region. That means in 1795, we see the Dutch East Indian Company packing, then the British taking over the Cape. So we are getting new leadership at the Cape, meaning the Dutch East Indian Company that had ruled the Cape from 1652, now by 1795, a period of almost 140 years, the company was parting, and the new rulers, now the British, from a new country now called Great Britain, was coming in to occupy the Cape. Next point, we are saying the first occupation arose from the request by the King of Holland for the British to occupy the Cape, so as to prevent France from occupying the Cape in what is famously known as the Q letters. My dear girls, we need to understand here developments in Europe. When we are looking at the events in South Africa, in one way or the other, they are influenced by the developments in Europe. In Europe, we have two events here, one major and another one minor. The major one is the French Revolution of 1789, where France undergone a revolution. And by 1793, France went and fought Holland. And when it fought Holland, Holland was defeated. And in 1795, the King of Holland freed to exile England. In Holland itself, in 1795, we also have a revolution, what is commonly known as the Batavian Revolution in Holland. So the King, William of Orange, freed Holland because of the Batavian Revolution, supported by the French Revolution, and went to England. And when the king went to England, he issued a proclamation, which is commonly known as the Q letters, saying that all the Dutch possessions, all the Dutch overseas possessions were now belonging to the British. So Britain, after that proclamation known as the Q letters, went and occupied the Cape in 1795. So that's why we are saying that the first British occupation of the Cape, it was after the request of the King William of Holland requesting the British to take over the Cape. Why did the King request Britain take over the Cape? The King requested Britain take over the Cape simply because the King feared that the Cape would fall into the hands of the French, who were now indirectly controlling Holland, that was in the hands of the Batavians. We are continuing, we are saying it should be noted that in 1795, the Netherlands experienced a revolution that led to the overthrow of the King, William of Orange, who had fled to England. I think I have already explained this, that in 1795, the Netherlands, or what we call Holland, when we say Holland or the Netherlands, we actually mean the same country, experienced a revolution, and the king was overthrown and he had to flee to England. And when he fled to England, that's when he issued what we call the Q letters that eventually requested Britain to take over the Dutch possessions, including the Cape. Girls, next we can say that the king feared that the French occupation of his country could lead to the French takeover of the Cape. In the first occupation, therefore, there was no serious fighting. When Britain left England and went downwards to the Cape to occupy the Cape, there was no serious fighting that was there. We don't see any serious fighting. In other words, the fighting could have been there, but it was not really serious. It was a peaceful settlement. It was a brief occupation, and the British kept themselves at the Cape. They did not penetrate into the interior. So in 1795, girls, when the British came at the Cape, they did not actually go deep into the interior. They kept at the Cape there in 1795, and whatever developments they initiated actually were initiated at the Cape. However, it should be noted that the Netherlands 1795 became the Batavian Republic under the Batavian rulers, who were largely influenced by the French Revolution. We are taking note of the events now in England, that in 1795, yes, as I have told you, that the king was overthrown, Now we have the Batavians ruling Holland, and Holland now, or the Netherlands, is renamed and becomes a different country called the Batavian Republic. I want to follow, yes, Paula? Paula, you can ask the question as we move on.
Yes, sir, I was asking, the Batavian Revolution.
Please, your voice, raise your voice.
Sir, can you hear me better now?
Now I can.
Okay, sir, I was asking about the Batavian Revolution.
Mm.
And I was asking, was this around the time when Napoleon had come to the Cape to take over?
Did Napoleon actually come to the Cape to take over?
I don't know what he came for exactly, sir, but I remember Napoleon went to the Cape. And then he
Now, what happened is in 1795, from 1789 actually, up to 1799, we have the French Revolution in Europe. And when we had the French Revolution in Europe, we see a lot of things happening in Europe. France is trying to attack different countries, and different European nationalities or people are influenced by the French Revolution ideas of equality, liberty, and fraternity. Okay, so in 1795, where you are saying that Napoleon had actually actually came to the Cape. No, Napoleon didn't come to the Cape. Actually, Napoleon came to Egypt when he was fighting in what we normally call the Egyptian campaign. But the Egyptian campaign was of 1798, I think, 1797, 1798, 1797, yes. So Napoleon, during this time, he was actually in where? He was in France, but carrying out different military campaigns. So one of the military campaigns that the French and Napoleon, Napoleon actually carried out was to attack England. And when he attacked Holland, and when he attacked Holland, actually he supported the Batavians to overthrow the king in the Batavian Revolution, and the king had to flee to Holland. When you Google and you put there Google, you will see what we call the Batavian Revolution of 1795 when we were born after this.
So I have one more question. Between the French Revolution and the Batavian Revolution, which one had more devastating effects?
The French Revolution had devastating effects because even the Batavian Revolution was influenced by the French Revolution.
Okay, sir. And one last thing, sir.
Yes.
Was when the Batavian Revolution was going on, were like its neighboring countries involved, just like how in the French Revolution,
you see, when we talk of a revolution, it can either be a sudden revolution, a sudden change that occurs within a short time, and in one day it is done. Okay, or it can take a longer period of time. Take an example, the French Revolution took about 10 years, from 1789 to 1799. But the Batavian Revolution took a very short time, and the king was overthrown, and a new constitution was promulgated. But actually, I didn't want to go so much into events in Europe, because we normally look at events in Europe and how they influenced the events in South Africa, bearing in mind that this is the history of South Africa. So we are saying that during the first
so one more thing.
Yes.
When the Batavian Revolution was going on, were they fighting for equality, like how the French Revolution was fighting for equality?
Yes,
to remove the first estate, the second estate,
yes,
and the
actually,
third estate?
The Batavians carried out that revolution because the Batavians were liberal and they were influenced by the French Revolution, and they were fighting actually for equality, liberty, and fraternity, like the French revolutionaries themselves. That's why when you see the policies they implemented, you will realize that they were largely influenced by the French Revolution.
So the Batavian people had like the first estate, the second estate, and the third estate, just like the people from France.
They didn't have that. Actually, if I was to go so much into that, you will realize that Netherlands before 1795, it was a federal-like state where it had seven 7 semi-independent states making up the Kingdom of Netherlands. But when the Batavians actually came, they established what we call a united government, a republic. The Batavian Republic was united. So we should not go so much into that because we are going to be taken so much by the events in Europe.
Mr.
But
Thank you, sir.
yeah, you're welcome. However, it should be noted. Yes. Hello. Yes, Madam Grace.
There is also another question that from which country were the Batavian rulers?
The Batavians were from Holland. They were from Holland. It was a Germanic, the Batavians was a Germanic tribe in Holland. So they were a Germanic tribe in Holland, one of the tribes that for quite some time was fighting for something like self-rule. You know, I told you that before 1795, Holland was a semi-federal state made up of something like 7 independent tribes, and the Batavians were one of the 7. So they were from Holland, but who were liberal, and for a longer time they were questing to be independent. So, and they were also liberal, not conservative. When we say liberal, we mean somebody who is broad-minded. So they were from Holland, and for a longer time they were requesting for independence, and they were requesting for a constitution. So when the French Revolution came, it influenced them more, and then they were supported by the French, and then they overthrew the King, William of Orange, who fled to England. I think that can explain that, Madam Grace. However, it should be noted that the Netherlands in 1795 became the Batavian Republic under the Batavian rulers, who were largely influenced by the French revolutionary ideas. Next, it should, however, be remembered that during the occupation, the governor of the Cape put some resistance at first against the British and Admiral Sir George Heath Elphiston. I told you that the fighting was not serious when the British were occupying the Cape for the first time in 1795. But the governor, like any man, he put there some little resistance. That is the governor. So after the defeat of the Cape forces, that is under the governor, in September 1795, at the Battle of Wynberg, the settlers decided to meet the British at new lands and negotiate for an armistice. So we are saying when the British defeated actually these people, and the settlers realized that they were not able actually to defeat the British, they said, what can we do? Let us go and negotiate for an armistice. When we say an armistice, girls, we mean a ceasefire, that you agree to stop fighting for some time. So the British came and they defeated them. Now the settlers said, Banang, these are the British. Let us go and negotiate with them because our forces were very weak. And now let us go and talk to them so that we can meet and agree. So they met at a place called New Lands and negotiated for an armistice, what I have called a ceasefire. In the armistice, or this agreement which they negotiated, the British and the settlers agreed that the British were to levy no any tax on the settlers. That is one part of the agreement or armistice. Respect their religion and to leave the owners in possession of private property. So this is what they agreed. No more taxation, respect of their religion, and then leave the owners in possession of their private property. The religion, that is the Dutch Reformed Church that was in control of religious events at the Cape, as we had agreed some times back. So on 16 September 1795, the Dutch thereafter surrendered the Cape to the British, and the British flag then replaced the Dutch one at the Cape. So The Dutch now officially took over the Cape on 16 September 1795, and the Union Jack, which is the Dutch flag, which is the British flag, was raised, and then the Dutch flag was lowered, which Dutch leadership at the Cape. Yes, Johanna.
No, it's okay. I've understood.
Okay, fine. In 1802, Britain and France signed the Amiens Peace Treaty. By this treaty, Britain was to evacuate the Cape, as France was to evacuate Holland. So, girls, so in 1802 now, we see the two powers that were fighting now signing an agreement, and the agreement is called the Amiens Peace Treaty. The word treaty is the same word as the agreement. So the Amiens Peace Treaty is signed in 1802 between France and Britain. This agreement, like any other agreement, had so many terms, but for our interests, we have this, that Britain was to leave the Cape, and France was also to evacuate Holland. Kazina asked the question.
So yes, my question was, when they signed this arms treaty, did it have anything to do with like the arms race and the like the weapons and stuff like that, or like guns? Did it have something to do with that?
I'm sorry, Kazina, you are missing a point here. You are calling it arms treaty, but it is Amiens treaty. You can look at the spelling, Amiens treaty, not arms. Okay, so it had nothing to do with arms. It is Amiens treaty, and in most cases, treaties are named after places where they have been signed from. When we say Buganda Agreement of 1900, it means it was signed in Buganda in most cases. So this has nothing to do with the arms. I can see somebody putting up the hand. To people, you ask the question before I continue.
Yes, teacher, I was asking that. So when the British had evacuated the Cape, did they leave it under the rule of the Dutch, or they were all in the same group?
You are reading my mind. So here, that's why I'm saying you are reading. Oh my God. Lower the hand. In 1802, Britain and France signed the Amiens Peace Treaty. By this treaty, Britain was to evacuate the Cape and France was to evacuate Holland. Is that clear? And France was to evacuate Holland. So I think this is where your question comes in now. And the one you were asking, that where did they leave the Cape? So the Cape was transferred to the Batavian Republic in Holland. The Batavian rule at the Cape was, however, too short-lived. So the Cape was transferred to the Batavian rulers in Holland. What we need to take note of is that from 1795, now Holland was called the Batavian Republic, and the new rulers of Holland now were the Batavians. So in 1802, when Britain and France signed the treaty, that Britain had to evacuate, to leave the Cape, and France had to leave Holland. So Britain handed over the Cape to the Batavians, who were new rulers of Holland. Because remember, King William of Orange had been overthrown, and now he was in exile in England. So officially, the Cape was handed over to Batavians. Yes,
Mr. Kagaba.
Yes.
This is Teacher Resty.
Yes, I can hear the voice, Madam.
Takati, what you should not forget is to, in your explanation, to give the girls the demarcation of the the leadership, as in from this period to this period, that was the British was coming. This period and this period, Batavian. This period, then we see them coming back. Because remember, when we are setting, in most cases, we may not even mention the word Batavian.
Madam, you are right. I was coming to that. I wanted to show them that now the Batavian were ruling. So girls, from 1652, as I have told you, up to 1795, now we have the Dutch East Indian Company ruling the Cape. As Madam Reste is saying, a question will come when it is general and it gives you the years from 1652 to 1795, the period of about 143 years, we have the Dutch. From 1795 up to 1802, now we have the British ruling the Cape. So from 1802, now the British, when they were leaving in 1802, after their first occupation, the Cape was handed over to the Batavians. As I told you, the Batavian role at the Cape was, however, short-lived. Actually, it lasted for only 3 years. So from 1803 February to 1806, so the Cape is under the Batavian. So that's why here we are saying in 1806, Britain sent a fleet of 63 ships to reconquer the Cape. The fleet was under the command of Major General Sir David Bayard. So in 1806, we see the British now coming to reconquer the Cape and overthrow the Batavians. Why did this happen? Why did the British come back to reconquer the Cape? Simply because both France and Britain had violated the Amiens Peace Treaty. So the peace treaty that had made the Britain to hand over the Cape to the Batavians was no longer holding. So we see Britain coming with a fleet of 63 ships to reconquer the Cape. The fleet was under the command of Major General Sir David Bayard. So this was after the violation of the Amiens Peace Treaty by both Britain and France. So the British are coming back now. You can lower the hand. I will give you a chance to ask the question in a few minutes. Let us finish this. Paula, lower your hand. On 6th January 1806, the British ships anchored at the Cape. On 8th January, a war between the British and the Dutch, led by General Johnson, started. When we talk of the Dutch here, I actually mean the Batavians, because the Batavians were also Dutch from Holland, although from part of Holland called Batavia. So on 8th January, a war between the British and the Dutch, led by General Johnson, started. General Johnson was a commissioner at the Cape under the Batavians. We shall see that later. On 19th January, the British assumed the control of the Cape after defeating the Dutch, or what you can call the Batavians. So in 1806, take note of these, girls. We see the British coming back with a fleet of 63 warships. Now they engaged the British, they engaged the Dutch or the Batavians, and within a period of 2 days, the Batavians or the Dutch were defeated. So we go on and say, on 6th March 1806, Bayard assumed office as an acting governor. The occupation was, however, not recognized since it was illegal until 1815 Vienna Settlement. Girls, we are saying that on 8th March, we see Bayard, one of the British generals, assuming office as the new governor of the Cape. We are saying, however, this occupation of the Cape was not recognized. Why was it not recognized, girls? Because it was illegal. Because the Cape belonged to Holland, and Holland had its rulers, who were the Batavians. So it was illegal until 1815 Vienna Settlement. What happened in 1815? The European powers gathered in Austrian capital called Vienna, and then they gathered there into a peace congress to discuss European affairs and sort of European problems. So in this meeting, they agreed that Britain should take over the Cape permanently. Then in 1814, Napoleon was defeated in Europe. Britain, which was actually, when he was defeated, he was exiled. He was defeated at the Battle of Leipzig and exiled to the island of Elba. Then Britain, which was one of the victor powers, officially was officially given the Cape as a token of appreciation. So you remember Napoleon was defeated at the Battle of Leipzig in 1814, although he escaped from Elba and came back to France and ruled for 100 days at the Battle of Waterloo. But nevertheless, we say in the Vienna Congress of 1814-1815, Britain was given the Cape as a token of appreciation because it was one of the victor powers that had helped to defeat Napoleon, both at the Battle of Leipzig and the Battle of Waterloo. So this formalized the British occupation of the Cape, and the Dutch were compensated with 700,000. I don't know whether they were called euros or pounds, but I think they were pounds at that time. So the British took over the Cape until much later, when South Africa became independent. We shall see the events that followed there, and the Dutch did not rule the Cape again. Until for a period of about 200 years or 150 years. In conclusion, the occupation of the Cape was both peaceful and violent. It was peaceful at first, but during the second occupation, there was some degree of violence. My dear girls, I can see the hands are up. So let me welcome those putting up the hands. We begin with Paula Kazina, then Mutonyi Esther will follow. Yes, Paula?
So yes, I have, my first question is, when they signed the Treaty of Armistice, am I pronouncing it correct?
Amiens.
Yes, Amiens. When they signed the treaty, was it broken and then they had to sign another one?
No, when they signed the when they signed the Treaty of Amiens in 1802, and it was violated. Actually, in 1806, Britain came back and reoccupied the Cape. So there was no any other treaty they signed. There was no any other treaty that was signed between Britain and France.
Yes,
so
one more question.
Yes.
Mr. And the girls should know that Napoleon did not live to the expectations of the British.
Yes.
They all agreed, like how we have explained the Treaty of Amiens, they all agreed that this is what we should do. No one should go in and work with the Batavian government again. The other time I told, when Napoleon went back to France, he actually caused the Napoleonic Wars, which Napoleonic Wars disorganized the whole of Europe. And now Britain became busy. Britain became busy suppressing the Napoleonic Wars, and that is what Napoleon does not do. Actually come back and work with the Batavians.
Actually, Madam, if I'm to add there, they used the Treaty of Amiens to give them breathing space so as to prepare for more war. So thank you, Muton Esther.
Yes,
then
Miss, I have one more question, please.
Yes.
In the Vienna settlement, when the countries, I think, go together in Vienna to like form peace, right?
Yes.
Was it like, when did they sign a treaty like how they did with the Treaty of Versailles? Like
yes,
France?
they signed what we call the Vienna Peace Settlement of 1815. Actually, it was signed on 9th June 1815. The Vienna Peace Settlement, although it is an amalgamation of so many other treaties, but in particular, this Treaty of the Vienna was signed on 9th June 1815. Yes, and in this agreement, the Cape was officially given to Britain. Is that answered?
Yes, thank you, sir.
Say, Mutonyi, lower your hand, Paula, then Mutonyi Esther. Yes, Esther. If Esther is not with us, we go. Yes, Esther?
Excuse me, teacher. I have a question.
Hello? Yes. Yes, Esther. You are breaking? Hello? Yes, Esther?
Excuse me, teacher.
Esther, I can't get you. I'm sorry. Let me listen to Noreen Akankunda as Esther is preparing herself to get network.
Sure, I wanted to ask.
Yes, you can ask.
If the Dutch were compensated for giving the Cape to the British, it means they did not give the British the Cape as a token of appreciation. So who gave the British the Cape?
In the first occupation, I told you, the King of Netherlands had been overthrown. The King of Holland had been overthrown, okay? And then he went to England to exile. Holland was taken over by the Batavians. So the implication was the King of Holland now who was, hello? The King of Holland now who was in exile requested Britain to take over the Cape as problems were being solved. But you see, in 1815, now Britain were permanently taking over the Cape, yet the king had given, remember the Batavians had been overthrown, the king had assumed her responsibilities back in Holland, but now the British were taking over the Cape forever. So that's why the Dutch had to be compensated, okay? Because the king at first, William of Orange, had thought it was a temporary takeover to prevent France from taking over the Cape. But remember, by 1815 Vienna Settlement, even Napoleon had been defeated. The king who had been overthrown by the Batavians had resumed, had gone back to Holland, had taken over back his throne. Now, but Britain was taking the Cape permanently. So for that loss, Holland had to be compensated with that 700 pounds. Yes, Mutonyi?
Excuse me, teacher, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, teacher, I have a question about the Batavians. And at
Yes.
first you said that they were a German tribe.
A Germanic tribe. Germanic tribe. Like
They had German origin, but they were in Holland.
Yes, they had German origin, but they were actually Dutch. They were Dutch, but with Germanic origin.
Say that they were okay. So you said
They were not. I'm not
tribes
saying they
in
were
Holland,
German. I said they were a Germanic tribe, but in Holland. And I said Holland before 1795 was a semi-federal kind of state where it was ruled separately. It had 7 major tribes ruled on the federal system. It was actually the Batavian who united them and ruled them as one. Okay.
So the Batavians kind of colonized Holland for a while.
They didn't colonize Holland, but they staged a revolution that overthrew the king, isn't it, and took over power, because the Batavians were also part of Holland. Like you can say Uganda is divided into 7 tribes, the Acholis, the Banyankore, and we have a king probably. And then the Banyankore come up and overthrow the king of Uganda, and then take over, and they name Uganda the Banyankore Republic, that kind of stuff. So you don't say that the Banyankore colonized Uganda because they are part of Uganda. They staged a revolution that overthrew the king. Is that clear?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Ameria Nadunga, you are the last before we go something else.
Something about wanting to have a breathing space because of wars that Napoleon was causing. So when they signed the Amiens Treaty, when they violated it, was Lessson Charity was explaining. She said that Napoleon was the first to violate it. So since he had broken the rules, the British also came and they went into war. But according to what you explained today, it's like as if Britain was going to come anyway, even if Napoleon had not come. So was the intention of taking the or
thank you. What we need to take note of is that the Amiens Treaty was signed in 1802, and the parties agreed on the clauses of the treaty. However, Napoleon was a warmonger in Europe. He didn't live up to the expectations of the British. So he violated the 1802 Amiens Treaty. Actually, if back in 1805, a coalition had also been formed against Napoleon in Europe. The third coalition, I think, had been formed against Napoleon in Europe, but I will not take you so much into that. Let us make this assumption that if Napoleon had actually not violated the Amiens Treaty, probably Britain would have respected it. Britain would have respected it because by then Britain was a peace-loving country. So we should not assume that even if Napoleon had not violated it, then Britain would have come in, take over the No. We should thank you for the question. Let me request Madame Grace to come in and look at what we actually call the nature of Dutch administration at the Cape. Madame Grace, please. Madame Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Kagaba. So girls, we are looking at the nature of administration of the Cape during the Batavian rule from 1803 to 1805. In other words, we are going to look at the hierarchy of administration. When you look at your country today, we have what we call the hierarchy of administration, like we have the president at the top, followed by the vice president to the common man. So in this case, we are looking at the Batavian rule, the way they administered the Cape from the top to the common man. To have some of the questions can be like, describe the nature of the Batavian rule at the Cape, or how did the Batavians administer the Cape? In this case, you're supposed to describe, you're supposed to give the hierarchy of administration from the top to the bottom. When you look at of the Cape during the Batavian rule from 1803 to 1805 or 1806, because they ruled for 3 years. The Batavians took over Holland in 1802 after the Amiens Peace Treaty. It was sworn in February 1803. And of course, they were given the license to administer the Cape. The Batavians who had possessions, including the Cape. Of course, Mr. Kagaba made it clear to you that the Dutch were the Batavians. But this came as a result of the Batavians, they were possessing the Cape as the ruler. The government at the Cape, the Batavian government. The Batavians were liberals, having been influenced by the French revolutionary ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity. In other words, the Batavians wanted freedom. So they were influenced by those 3 catchwords of the French Revolution: liberty, equality, and fraternity. They wanted the equality at the Cape. They wanted the brotherhood at the Cape, that is the fraternity, and liberty, equality, and fraternity. Freedom, equality among the people at the Cape, then looking at one another as brothers and sisters without discrimination, like it was in the beginning during the time of the original Dutch, who were too discriminative and they were very proud. So they were liberals. In their administration, the Dutch under the the administration under the Batavians was dominated by 2 important posts. That is These were a governor general and a commissioner general. That is at the top. Another slide, Mr. Kagaba. The governor general was Jan Jensens and the commissioner was Jacobus de Mist Abraham. The governor general was the head of administration. He was also to make laws governing the Cape. If you are to describe the nature, it's like giving, you arrange those leaders in order from the top to the bottom, and there must be chronology. So the governor general was the head of administration. He was also to make laws governing the Cape. He was also entrusted with the role of appointing and dismissing government officials. He also handled the criminal and civil affairs. The administration was a mixture of both the Batavians and the British. Of course, the Batavians occupied the topmost posts and the British occupied the lower posts because at this time, the Batavians were in control. So they had to occupy the senior posts followed by the British. Another slide, Mr. Kagaba. At the Cape, if you look at the hierarchy of administration during the Batavians, the judicial system was reformed and the High Court was made independent. Every district was under a landrost who was paid a salary, and the landrost was a magistrate of his district. He also kept law and order in the district. If I say a landrost, he's similar to a judicial official with the authority to administer. Therefore, during the time of the Batavians, every district was under a landrost, meaning he had authority to administer that area assigned to him. There was also a council of 6 elders who assisted the landrost to govern each district, and the elders were chosen among the burghers. A council of 6 elders who assisted the magistrate who had the authority to administer. And these elders were chosen among the burghers. If I say the burghers, I mean important people among the Dutch people. People with the chiefly positions were supposed to assist the landrost or the magistrate of that particular district. Mr. Kagaba, another slide. Among the Batavians, or during their role at the Cape, there was a government representative in each subdivision of every district called a ville-de-connaught. The ville-de-connaught was a government representative in each division. All the trade restrictions that had been imposed by the Dutch East India Company were removed by the Batavians. The government also treated Khoikhoi fairly. When you look at the Batavian government that was short-lived for just 3 years, at least there were reforms. There is this Batavian government humanly treated the Khoikhoi or the Africans, unlike the original Dutch, who were very proud and always discriminated the Africans and subjected them to slavery. This time the Batavians made reforms and they treated the Africans, in particular the Khoikhoi, fairly. Some natives were given back their land, and this reduced land conflicts between the settlers and the natives. Who were the natives? The Africans. They were given back their land by the Batavian government. We are busy describing the nature of their administration. How did they rule the people? They were able to give back land to the natives, which they had lost to the original Dutch. And remember, during the time of the Dutch, before the Batavian government, the Africans are always displaced from their original land. They were supposed to be like squatters on the land owned by the Dutch, and they were supposed to work as slaves to the Dutch. So when the Batavians came into power, they made reforms and gave back land to the natives, the Africans. Slave labor was discouraged, and the government encouraged white labor to replace slave labor. Slave labor was discouraged. Who were slaves by that time? They were the Africans working as slaves to the Dutch. Now, when the Batavian government came into power, this type of slavery was abolished and it was replaced by white labor. People would work at their own will and they were supposed to be paid. And there was limited time for their work. During the Batavian government, of course, the hours for working were reduced and the laborers were supposed to be paid. Initially, the original Dutch were subjecting the Africans to slavery. They didn't pay them. They harshly treated them, and they would work from morning to evening without resting. But when the Batavians came into power, they made reforms. Freedom of worship was extended to all religions of different groups, such as the Catholics, the Protestants, among others at the Cape. Freedom of worship. Meaning during the time of the Dutch rule, people were supposed to belong to the Dutch Reformed Church. Meaning these other religions were not considered. But when the Batavians came into power, of course, they were considerate to other religions. They gave them a freedom of worship. To the Catholics, they were free to go to their Catholic churches, just like the Protestants. Mr. Kagaba, another slide. Yes, sorry to take you back, but what you should know, describing the nature of administration. How did they administer the Cape? Every time you're answering a question, you always refer to the question and see whether you are still in line with it. So during the time of the Batavians, this new government, the education and the Batavians encouraged the thinking and discussion. And before the Africans were denied education. They were only the schools. They were supposed to acquire education at the expense of the natives of South Africa, who were the Africans. But when the Batavians came into power, of course, education was made free, and this type of education encouraged the thinking and discussion, unlike before. More still, during the Batavian government, merino ship were imported from Spain, and many other projects were set up to improve on the Cape's economy. All slaves at the Cape were given fair contracts during the Batavian government. In conclusion, the Batavian administration was more liberal. It brought peace in South Africa, unlike the Dutch government during the Dutch East India Company when it was still in control. At least there were reforms, and the people appreciated. They were happy for the 3 years the Batavians ruled the Cape. Unless there is any question, I hand over to Mr. Kagaba.
Thank you, Madam Grace. We have about 2 minutes to end the lesson. And if any of the girls has a question, can ask the question Let me see. We seem not to have question. Yes, Paula. Paula, you have your question.
No, sir, I forgot my question. Never mind.
Okay. Then Juliet, you have a question? I saw somebody like Juliet. Please. Any other person with a question?
So yes, now I remember.
Okay, Paula.
When they exiled Napoleon, did anyone come to help him?
Napoleon was exiled twice. That is, after his defeat at the Battle of Leipzig in 1813, he was exiled to the island of Elba. And when he was exiled to that island, Napoleon escaped from Elba. He came, he was welcomed by the Frenchmen. Then he overthrew the government that now was in France of the restored Bourbons under Louis XVIII, and he ruled France again for 100 days. Then the Vienna peacemakers organized a force, and they fought Napoleon and defeated him at the Battle of Waterloo. And then he was exiled to the island of St. Helena in southern Atlantic Ocean, from where he died from. So from that explanation, from that explanation, you will realize that Napoleon had become an European problem, and therefore no one helped him, because when he was exiled at the island of St. Helena in southern Atlantic Ocean, he died from there. Thank you. Another question?
Okay, so my question was, you spoke about King Louis XVIII, but I thought when Napoleon came and he killed King Louis XVI, his wife Marie Antoinette, and all King Louis's children by the guillotine, I thought he never had like any children.
No, King Louis XVIII was actually a brother to King Louis XVI. You remember, we also have Charles X. Those two were brothers of King Louis XVI that had been guillotined in 1793. So when Napoleon was defeated, the brother of King Louis XVI, now called King Louis XVIII, is the one who assumed the throne and ruled France until 1824 when he died. And his brother, now Charles X, or the one called Comte d'Artois, came and ruled France until 1830 when he was defeated in what we call the July Revolution of 1830 in France. But anyway, all that is about European history. We can't go so much into Europe because we are trying to look at the history of South Africa.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So can you give us, Lucinga, ask your question and then give us a closing prayer. Hello?
Teacher.
Yes.
What happens when you're exiled? Do you have like a house there where you live in that place and you're not supposed to move away from that place, or do they just dump you there with nothing?
When you are in exile, you enjoy freedoms apart from going back at your country. That is one. But for the case of Napoleon, he was a prisoner actually in this island. He was a prisoner being guarded, and that's why he escaped from the island of Elba. So he was not supposed to come back at France, but he escaped, and later on when he was exiled, he was kept under key and lock until he died. So when you are exiled, you may enjoy other freedoms, but you are not allowed to come back at your country because you are in exile. And when we talk of exile, it means you are forced out of your country. Okay, Lucinga, thank you for that question. Please, can you give us a closing prayer and then we log off?
Yes. Teacher, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, let's humble ourselves for a word of prayer. Oh Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for the gift of life.
Thank you for the gift of salvation. Lord, I pray that you enable us to remember whatever the teachers have taught us, and that we may, when exams come, we may know what to write and we may understand the questions. And Lord, help us to understand this and not to just cram. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you. Have a blessed day.
Bye.
Bye.